So just to do a quick disclaimer with you, so that you know that this video is being recorded and utilized. By recording this video, do you, Dondra Agovino, agree to allow your likeness and endorsement and interview to be used in various social media posts and on YouTube?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Well, just to start out, I'm excited to get to talk to you today and learn about a new and exciting book that we've both read. But
Mhm.
before we do that, would you mind just telling our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, sure. I'm Dondra Agovino. I am a licensed professional counselor out in Cottleville, Missouri, over in St. Charles, and I do a lot of work with individuals who have experienced varying degrees of trauma. So it could be like developmental trauma from their families, a little bit about like things that the book Generations Deep might highlight. And then also I do a lot of work with couples, so there's a lot of relationship stuff that really resonates with me from the book as well. So that's just a little bit about who I am. Yeah.
That's
What I
awesome.
do right now. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, so as you're aware, we're going to talk about Generations Deep, unmasking inherited dysfunction and trauma to rewrite our stories through faith and therapy by Gina Birkemeier.
Mhm.
So I just love to start out by hearing what some of your key takeaways were the first time that you read Generations Deep.
Yeah. There were just so many from the book. I think just it was such an enlightening read for me. And from a psychological perspective, I took away, a lot about just kind of the effects that generational trauma has, how generations kind of pass down the trauma effects through both through like the genetic propensities, and then also through kind of the attitudes and actions and how we kind of show up in the world and how we affect each other generationally in our parenting. And so that was a huge kind of takeaway for me was seeing like I love how Gina illustrates that in the book with her own story,
Mhm.
which is so beautiful to see the impact that that has. So that was a one huge takeaway for me personally, and then as a practitioner. And then another takeaway was really hope. I think the book is full of hope and hope in God's healing power over some of these traumatic effects that kind of how they affect and change us and how God can use our relationship with him as well as our relationship with others to kind of help it heal some of those traumatic effects or causes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So those are two huge for me. Yeah.
that's awesome. I know when you're working with so many patients that and clients that have this kind of trauma, hope is something that you just have to cling to with them.
Mm. Yeah. Very true. Yeah.
Um, so how has since reading Generation Deep impacted your life
Mhm.
personally?
Yeah. Um, well, I think Gina's story is so beautifully told and just the vulnerability that she expresses in the kind of the pain and the isolation and the hurt that she experienced growing up. It just impacted me greatly just reading that story. I think, I really believe that as humans, we're just so that connection with Gina, I think through the book, we're so relational beings, I believe, that I think that had a huge impact on my heart and just also being able to kind of be willing to look at my own story through sort of that lens. I love how Gina, it feels like she kind of cares well for her younger self as she's telling the story, that she can name the emotions that she had, but there's kind of this ability to hold that in a really kind way. And I think that I felt that as a reader of the book. And so that really helps me to try to have that kindness towards myself and towards others when I kind of go into the depths of my story or when my clients or friends kind of are telling their stories. So that was a huge, huge impact on me. Um, Probably the biggest in the book, from the book. But,
Oh man, that's great. As you're talking, I'm relating to your experience so much. I found myself pausing and tearful and joyful and then broken and like right along with
Mhm.
her, but all the while like she upheld the dignity of her own, like you said, childhood and her own
Yeah.
story and her own, she really did a good job to display that for her readers and how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like that was a good memory jogger for me for you to share that book.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so then what does it mean to heal through faith and in relationship? Because that's something Gina talked about regularly and was sort of
Mhm.
a part of the story. So what does that mean to heal through faith and in relationship?
Well, I really believe, like, I think I hinted at this earlier, that it's so critically important because I believe that the Bible shows us that we're designed kind of in the very core of our being to be relational creatures, right? And that I think that you could see in through generations deep that harm happens in relationships, and then conversely, that relationships are also where we heal. And so, in our relationship with God, whose perfect love kind of enables us to feel accepted for who we are and also comforted in our pain and in our struggles, and as well as in our relationships, right, with our friends or our spouse or family, when we're met with compassion or when we're able to offer that compassion and understanding, I think that connection is really what helps us heal the most, right? So I really love that the book highlights the importance of connecting with each other, with God, and then also even with the younger parts of ourselves that have been wounded or hurt at various times. So, yeah.
And so for in your experience, for those who might not have or don't choose to engage in these kind of relationships with their family member or their friends, how would you say you can utilize this same principle in the therapy room with your clients
Oh, I like as a clinician, you mean?
as a clinician?
Very much like I think in the same way that, well, I love the book because, Gina is a therapist, right? So she's walking us along in her story, but she's also giving us those kind of questions at the end where we can kind of engage our own story. And that's definitely, I think, how I work with clients, right? Is to help them engage those parts of their story and to name things, but to offer kind of that compassion and care in that context so that people feel kind of that corrective experience that helps us heal of feeling cared for in our woundedness, right? So I think that would be the biggest way, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So good. Um, so in the book, you know, she talks often about the key features towards breaking the generational cycle.
Mhm.
I'm just curious to know what resonated with you the very most and why.
Mm, I think this is why I love this book so much, honestly, because Gina not only like she doesn't just tell us what we need to do, she shows it in the way she writes the book, right? So I love that because the book, I think, highlights how important it is to kind of engage with our own stories of hurt and harm. And, how, like I was saying earlier, like how we go about doing that with kindness and compassion to ourselves. Like you said, dignity, I love that word, to honor the hurt and harm that we've experienced, and also to, you see in her story how she goes back and she not only names the harm that she experienced with family members, but she also kind of goes into their story to understand what they went through and how they kind of came to where they were in how they related to other people. And I thought that was really beautiful. And so you kind of see like how there's just a lot of awareness throughout the book, and there's also a lot of kind of compassion that kind of just with each character she kind of shows like such honesty about the impact that they had on each other
Yeah.
going down the generation, but also like so much compassion about why that was the case. And so I thought that that just resonated for me about how that's what we all need to do, right? So she gives a beautiful picture of that. It's not just a how-to book, right? So I think that,
Yeah, compassion. You're really touching on something important there. No matter what kind of trauma has happened in life, to be able to look at someone else and try and see from their perspective, even when you consider generational impact just in our societal changes from the boomers to the Gen Xers to the millennials, like
right,
thinking about who raised which generation and what they walked through before that ever happened. So yeah, seeing with different lenses of compassion from was really important. I'm glad you touched on that.
yeah, I love that.
So in your practice then, and from a standpoint of who can benefit from the book, um, who would you recommend read this book and why?
My first, when I read this question, I loved it because I put anyone in bold. I was like, anyone can benefit because we all have parents, we all have grandparents, and their stories have impacted us. And even though we may not know, Gina did a beautiful job of kind of going back and trying to learn about the different generations in her family and how what their stories were. And, some of us are able to learn that through family members or kind of track down some of that information. Some of us aren't. However, because no matter what the depth of the trauma or the extent of that we know about that trauma, we've all been hurt and we all, lack some of that connection growing up and understanding how that affected us and how we can heal from that. To me, anyone can benefit from. um, I've been studying psychology for like 20 plus years, and reading Gina's books still had a huge impact on me because I'm a person and I have a story. And so I could resonate with so many of the things that she went through, even though our stories are not identical, right? It's like such the human experience to feel, um, to need support and not always have that, right? What we need in those moments. So anyone really is my
Right.
answer. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think your point about being in this world for so long is really important to even hear because just it for exactly why you said you never know what story is going to impact you and how that can draw us into relationship with each other or even someone else in our world that we hadn't thought of before but we might have known a piece of her story was like Gina's story and now
Yeah.
we have new fresh eyes and a heart feeling toward what that person must have experienced and offer an extended hand of like love and compassion for that too. So,
For sure. Yeah.
um,
I love how you said that. I love the fresh eyes to see is
hmm.
I think this story, Gina's story, helped give me kind of fresh eyes to see my own story. So I love that your phrase there. I think that's a beautiful way to see it. Like we can always have fresh eyes to see our own story. And I believe in my experience that God gives us fresh eyes each time we look at our story to see and to name some of the things that went on for us and to have compassion for that. So, yeah, I love when you use those words. Yeah.
So then I guess one or two other questions I would have for you today is the first would be, how what might a reader expect to be challenged by if they read this book? Are there any sort of warnings you would give, or is there something that you could
Yeah, I think Gina does a good job giving some warnings throughout the book about some of the material can be triggering. But I really believe that readers can be challenged in multiple ways. I know it challenged me, like I said, to dig deeper into my story, to connect more deeply with what my younger self had kind of needed that was not available for me, right? Just like in Gina's story. I love, like I said, the questions at the end of the chapters, which help you kind of dig a little bit deeper into our own experiences. And then also, it encouraged me in being, I think, more vulnerable with myself
Oh.
about my experiences,
Hmm.
as well as kind of being trying to be open to share them with other people. I think I was really moved that Gina would create such a beautiful, vulnerable work where she shares her story with the reader. I think it just encouraged me, like, vulnerability is so important for creating that connection with other people. And so I think that was a huge challenge for me. And I would imagine that readers might have the same challenge and hopefully impact them positively with that challenge of just trying to be more vulnerable. Right. Yeah.
So right. I mean, it takes so much courage to move into those really hard, messy spaces that we think we can just, glaze over and
Yeah.
not have to think about again. But as we all know, we hold those inside somewhere, and they
Yeah.
come out in other places. And she
Yeah.
really helped to unpack that for us really
Yeah.
well. Well, so if is there anything else that you would want to share about the book, or share about how it impacted you, or
I really loved, like, thinking about, Gina kind of touches on, implicit and explicit memories.
yeah, yeah,
And of course, as a clinician, I'm aware that our implicit memories, the ones that tend to be the ones that we don't remember consciously, but that are kind of the unconscious drivers that kind of create the neural networks that, form our perceptions of ourselves and the world. I think that, what I experienced personally is there could be enormous benefits to thinking about the parts of our story that we do remember, the explicit memories that I believe connect with the implicit memories and the implicit views that we kind of have about ourselves. Then I thought that Gina's book also does a beautiful job of connecting those, because obviously she's telling a story that she remembers, but it very clearly shows up in how, she views herself and how she views the world, and how, um, you know, that can almost be a way, a kind of a portal. Those, our story is a portal into processing sort of the implicit and unconscious mindsets that we hold about ourselves and others and the world around us. And so I thought that's another thing that I loved about the book, right? Was that it kind of highlights
yeah,
that
yeah.
we can do that. So
Do you think that would surprise your general, and as a clinician, would that surprise your general client base to know about that, to know about how implicit memories present in other capacities?
yeah, I think that, I mean, even for me, that was a revolutionary thing, like learning that as a clinician, that how much, and I think my struggle with implicit memories was it kind of feels like, well, if I don't remember it, I feel kind of powerless to change it. Like, and so what I love about Gina's book is it helps us see that, like, our explicit memories, the parts of our story that we do remember, actually give us kind of that ability to process and reprocess and restructure the kind of unconscious things that drive us, right? And so, because otherwise I feel kind of hopeless. How am I going to change what I can't even remember? Or it makes me feel like I have to dig for or create things that, maybe that starts to feel really artificial. But I think it's a beautiful way for us to engage with those parts of ourselves, and without having to try to, you know, do anything strange or foreign, that, how are we going to access that? So,
Right, right. Yeah, that's really helpful. So you mentioned hope in that answer, and I guess maybe we could just close with um, how when Gina explained that it's never too late to be a cycle breaker,
mm,
what message of hope do you hear from this?
mm, yeah, I that's a great question. I mean, tremendous hope. I think the book, even though it covers some really, really hard things, there's so much hope in it, even in the moments where she so beautifully acknowledges that I wasn't quite there yet, either in my relationship with God or with trusting other people. There's just so much hope throughout it of seeing like God meets us where we are and healing takes place kind of where we are, and that we don't have to have this pressure or this timeline, but that hope kind of keeps us, it can kind of keep us going in those moments where we really don't know what we believe or how we're doing or how we're feeling, or we don't have an answer, maybe to a solution to what is going on with us. We still can have that hope that God's working, and that we are, if we just stay present to ourselves and try to stay present to whatever we're going through, then that helps us to kind of keep moving forward. And I thought that was a lovely way she kind of wove that just as part of her. It's just part of her story, right? I don't think that she was like, oh, I've got to put some hope in here, right? Hope in here. It was just like, it's just so part of, organically part of the story, that I think that was really amazing.
Yeah, to see that growth process and see the ongoing change, even all the way up into the
Mm,
present moment. You get to just continue to see how that works. I know that's how I feel in life. I often feel like once I get to this time, I'm gonna know what I need to know, and I'm gonna feel all the right things, and
right,
I'll have arrived. But once
right.
you get there, you realize, well, not quite. We're still growing, and that's okay, because as long as we're doing it together, um,
Yeah,
we have the support we need, and can continue to move forward together. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
awesome.
definitely.
Well, I've really enjoyed listening to you, and I'm so excited with you for for this book and for its release, and for the many people that I hope she reaches and is able to help through their own stories and journeys that are
Oh,
difficult.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Me too, Tiffany. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, doing this. I'm super excited too to see the impact this has out there in the world. So, yeah, it was
Yeah.
fun. Super fun. Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.